And our meeting tonight is now open for sharing testimonies of healing through Christian Science. Jim from Arizona, go ahead.
Greetings from Arizona. This has been a glorious day, and I wish to express my great gratitude for this meeting. It has been outstanding. And I am now settling down in my new home, and it's becoming very, very comfortable. Just a while ago, I lost the light of the daylight, and it's completely dark by now. And it's just happened during our meeting here. Thank you very much, and you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Nancy from New Jersey, go ahead.
Thank you for this beautiful service this evening. Tonight I'd like to express my gratitude for one of the many blessings that has come into my life since joining the Plainfield Church. My granddaughters have started attending the Sunday school via the teleconference number, and I'm so very deeply grateful for this. First, I'd like to express my heartfelt love and gratitude to the Sunday school teachers for the great lessons, the love, and the blessings that they bring to all the children who attend. My granddaughters tell me often how much they love Sunday school, where they're learning about who they are as God's child. Recently, one of my granddaughters was having a lot of anxiety at bedtime and difficulty falling asleep. She told me about this, and we talked about how God's love is always with her, and I suggested that perhaps she should listen to some peaceful music before falling asleep. Several days later, she told me with a big smile on her face, "Guess what? I'm not feeling anxious or sick at bedtime anymore, and I'm able to sleep." I asked her what brought this about, and she told me that she remembered that sometimes when her mother would listen to the roundtables, she would ask if she could listen with her, and that she really loved them, and they made her feel very peaceful. So she decided to try to find the Plainfield website on her own, which she did, and she started listening to the roundtables by herself at bedtime. She said, "They make me feel so calm and peaceful that I'm able to fall asleep, and now I don't feel anxious or sick at bedtime anymore." And she's told me that she still listens to them every night. I was so overjoyed and grateful to God for her beautiful demonstration of God's love and care for his children. And I know that it was God's angel message that led her to seek out the website and listen to the roundtable recordings. Now, truthfully, I would never have thought to suggest that to her since she is only 11 years old. However, Mrs. Eddy writes in prose works in her message on page 6 of the message for 1900, quote, "A child can measurably understand Christian Science, for through his simple faith and purity, he takes in its spiritual sense that puzzles the man. The child not only accepts Christian Science more readily than the adult, but he practices it." What a beautiful confirmation this was of that statement. I'm so grateful to God, to Mrs. Eddy for her gift of Christian Science, to this church, our Sunday school teachers, and our practitioners who give us the pure teaching of Christian Science. What better gift could we ever give to our loved ones than to share with them the beautiful teachings that we are taught and given here? I'm very grateful to be here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Joanne from Florida, go ahead.
Thank you. In the lesson this week, it says, "Let us come before his presence with thanksgiving and make a joyful noise." Well, the joyful noise I want to make tonight is gratitude for the pure Christian Science teaching that I've received here in this church. It changed me from a lonely, self-centered, troubled, and unstable person to someone who feels the rock-solid safety of God's love and now has a satisfying purpose in serving him. I've experienced many healings since coming to this church. Healings of health, income supply, business situations, and personal relationships. I'm also grateful for every needed lesson in gratitude, patience, humility, and obedient listening to God that I've learned along the way. It all came about through the teaching and the prayers of practitioners in this church. Every bit of good in my life I owe to God and Mrs. Eddy's pure Christian Science and to membership in this church. This is my joyful noise tonight, and I'm so grateful to be here to make it. And thank you for that beautiful prelude music and the readings. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ron, North Carolina.
Ron from North Carolina, go ahead.
Thank you. About a month ago, I began to periodically experience very painful physical attacks followed by relative calm. I began working metaphysically against this form of aggressive animal magnetism as I was taught in Christian Science. I denied the error in all its manifestation while affirming the truth of God's allness, repeating the scientific statement of being over and over during the times of intense pain. I continued these attempts for several days with no change in the condition. In fact, it was screaming louder, alternating waves of pain and relief. It was at that point that I asked for the support of a practitioner from this church, and that's when the healing truly began. It's also when I began getting schooled in the right and effective way to heal. That may not have been the practitioner's intention, but I was confronted by my own feeble flutterings when she immediately turned my focus towards the light of God's reality and myself as a divine idea and away from the lie. Over the next 11 days, God's truth confronted my fears, discouragements, and doubts. I questioned the effectiveness of this science. The practitioner's loving response was always to direct my thought to the enduring, the good, and the true. Late one night, I was struggling and feeling despondent when suddenly a message came from the practitioner to work with Psalm 31:5. Quote, "And to thine hand I commit my spirit. Thou hast redeemed me, O Lord, God of truth." This was a staff to lean on at a low point. I was recommended to read Daniel Jensen's Beginning Rightly, and two things stood out. In the article, Jensen recounts of a healing where a mother was advised not to peek at her son's legs after giving treatment, not to look at the error for proof that the healing had taken place. Upon reflection, I realized I was not looking to the reduction of pain for the healing as much as I was gauging it against the body when it felt relief. Wanting that body to stay was consuming my attention. I needed to turn away from both the pain and relief bodies completely, directing my entire focus on God's allness. Another aspect of Jensen's talk was when he became emotional when referring to Mrs. Eddy as his best friend when studying and working with her writings. I shared with the practitioner that I had never had such emotional feelings toward Mary Baker Eddy, Jesus, or God. The practitioner was able to lift that off my shoulders by assuring me that all communication, all the qualities of God were from God to his idea man. I was not the generator of such love, but the reflector. The pain subsided after these revelations, while other aspects of the mesmerism lingered on, but I now sensed the power of God's love growing in my consciousness, while the mesmeric grip was lessening its hold to its final self-destruction. During this journey, I was comforted during the sleepless nights by many of the writings offered by the Plainfield website. During one particularly restless night, I was awakened around 2 a.m. in the morning, and there was the Daily Thoughts from Plainfield. My first thought was, what is Jeremy doing up at this hour sending this material? And I realized that it's just one more aspect of the church's outreach. The particular timing of the Daily Thoughts has to be God-inspired, for it's when the earth slumbers, there exists the potential for animal magnetism to rear its head and make some noise. During this time, the roundtables, the Bible classes, and the opportunities to do watches all felt like they were speaking directly to this challenge, exposing it for what it truly was. I'm so grateful for this healing, for the practitioner whose patient and loving and principled support kept pointing me in the right direction. To God, Mary Baker Eddy, and the Plainfield Church for all the support that is offered. There was a point during this healing after the pain lifted, and I jokingly asked God, why did it have to take so long? not expecting an answer, but an answer immediately followed. You would not have believed me. When you consider eternity, 2 weeks in mortal time loses all significance. I'm so grateful for this experience, which is continuing to teach me more about God's reality and my relationship to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Luba.
Luba from Ohio, go ahead.
Thank you. For a while, I had been experiencing hip pain, especially when getting up in the morning. I literally could not stand upright and walk without extreme pain. I called my practitioner, who stated that if God does not have it, I don't have it. I am the reflection of perfection. God's perfection is a law. Perfection does not change. All discord is illusion. God's creation is only what's real, and God's perfect universe is all that is true. I'm so grateful that this illusion of hip pain is no longer there, and I'm forever grateful to my patient, loving practitioner, who is always there and has brought much healing and a greater understanding of Christian Science. Thank you for tonight's reading, and I am happy to be here this evening.
Thank you.
Dave.
Dave from Florida, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Years ago, the large company I was working for announced that they would be downsizing, and I was told that I was one of the ones that would be asked to leave. I got help from a practitioner on this, and one of the things I was told was to trust God and to know that He had a good plan for me and it would be better. Progress is God's law. That turned out to be very true. The company gave me a nice-sized lump sum payment and also full retirement. But even more proof of God's care through this was the fact that a couple of weeks after I left the company, my wife happened to mention to an acquaintance of hers that I was looking for a sales job. This lady and her husband owned a small company, and she said they were looking for a good salesperson. I met with them the following week, and they hired me. I stayed with them for quite a few years, and they even allowed me to keep working for them when we moved to Florida. I'm very grateful for this, and to know that God always has a good plan for us when we turn to Him. I'm grateful for Christian Science, for the work of the practitioners, and to be a member here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sandy, Nebraska.
Sandy from Nebraska, go ahead.
I'm very grateful for your readings tonight, and I'm very, very, very grateful for the practitioner, Ms. Beribel Singletary, for the round table. As we was driving back to North Carolina from Nebraska, we had never done such a long driving, and I don't want to see the symptoms, but I had the fear and panicking. But I remember, Miss Beribel, I don't remember it wasn't the round table or something that I look in your arcade that she was saying that she sometimes when she wake up and she had to deal with her own things that she had to work. And I remember I have a little resentment for something that happened to me years ago. And that created that panic on my insecurity in the road. So I started in my thought, I remember what the practitioners say, and I think that was Miss Beribel in the round table, and I started working. I wasn't driving back to North Carolina, was my fiancé. And I started praying that we always protected and guide, and that I had to love, that I had to heal my own error that came into me is panicking and about the transfer thought that I was sending. And I said, I have to work. And then I remember in one testimony meeting a couple weeks ago, one of the person that testified about she have a situation with her car It was dark, it was raining. But she always knew that she is safe and protected. And we got here to North Carolina with any problem. We got to the fruiters. I started reading the fruiters on Miss Mary Baker Eddy and on the testimony. But the testimony on Miss Mary Baker there is the practitioner. They needed to look at me, not at the outside, so I can heal it. And I'm so grateful for all the art, the stuff that you have in your website. I'm like the lady that talk about her granddaughter. Every night before I go to sleep, I put the Psalm 91 or I listen to the round tables and I sleep beautifully, happily, like the little girl they do at the 11 years old. I'm so grateful for the love when you guys talk and teaching us and helping us to know that we are children of God, that we have the right to be safe and protected, able to sleep without fear. And like you talk about the news, we don't need to listen to the news of the outside. We need to listen to the right news of the kingdom of God. I'm so grateful for Mary Baker Eddy. We keep all the scriptures open on love was sealed. And now we got this wonderful church and everything you guys do with the love of Christ in this Christmas season. I'm so grateful for your teaching tonight.
Thank you. Elizabeth from Georgia, go ahead.
Good evening. I have a lot to be grateful for this year, and I'd like to express my gratitude to God and how He's cared for and blessed our family in 2020. I've learned valuable lessons to trust God unconditionally, to understand that everything belongs to Him, and to be faithful in doing His work. I'm learning it is necessary to see the blessing in everything, because there is always one despite the situation, and if we are willing to be humble to learn it. My practitioner here has helped me through the years understand these lessons, for which I'm very grateful. After being hired in February for a job that fit his qualifications perfectly, my husband was laid off from this job 4 months later due to the COVID situation. In previous years, prior to Plainfield, I would have been racked with worry, but I refused to go down that route. Instead, I listened many times to the article Finance by Bicknell Young, which is on the Plainfield YouTube channel. In this article, Mr. Young says, quote, "Divine principle brings need and supply together for mutual good," unquote. I knew that God would provide a match for my husband's need to be employed and someone else's need for a job to be done in a correct, perfect way. And so in October, the same company that ended his job rehired him as a contractor for a big project that will extend into 2021. In March, April, and May, we lost a significant amount of income when the homes we rent were shut down. We were led to take certain steps to bridge the gap and never lacked during this time. Again, God supplied all our needs and increased it. This income has been restored since June, when our areas opened up, and many people wanted to get away to spend time with family and friends. In fact, one of the homes we rent has had its best year ever, and we've had the most wonderful guests who appreciated their time. In September, error again tried to dismantle things when a hurricane damaged the lower backyard of this home, obliterating the dock, concrete steps, beach fence, and causing thousands of dollars in damage that our insurance company said was not covered under our policy. I'm grateful to say that the home was not damaged, only a few boards of siding were ripped off, and we were able to continue to rent without skipping a beat, as guests were still able to utilize most of what's offered. I worked at times with Mrs. Eddy's statement in Science and Health. Hold thoughts steadfastly to the enduring, the good, and the true, and you will bring these into your experience proportionably to their occupancy of your thoughts. We were able to schedule an online mediation meeting with a mediator and the insurance company. And the insurance company gave us a significant amount of additional money. At the end of the call, the mediator thanked us for being clear, concise, and calm in presenting our side of the situation, and that it was one of the more harmonious meetings he'd been part of. As the Bible says, all things work together for good to them that love God. This is a law I have found to work every time in my experience, as I learned that we should embrace the trials and tribulations because they help push us higher spiritually to trust God more. Thank you to God, Jesus, and to Mary Baker Eddy for her unselfish gift of Christian Science to the world, to this church, and to my practitioner who has held fast to the truth and supported me during this time, impressing upon me time and again these lessons. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeremy.
There you go. I am grateful to be here tonight. I have said often how fearful I used to be before Plainfield. Since coming here and starting down this path of taking part in the study of Christian Science and having regular practitioner support and working for the church, I have steadily been gaining an equivalent portion of peace. I have such gratitude for the purpose that has been made available to me here. And I'm also grateful for everyone else that has come in to find their purpose in the work. It was recently announced that if anyone would like to do typing or proofing, we would be grateful for the help. I'm thankful to say we had many volunteers. It gives me great joy to interact with each one and see how they are using their science to overcome whatever obstacles come along so they can finish the work that they take on. I know how much I have gained and am still gaining, and it's just wonderful to see others stepping up and demonstrating. All this made me think about when I first came here. It seemed like an incredibly special group was here. And while that was accurate, I see now the reason it was accurate was because each person first felt God's call and then worked and worked and worked year after year. The high standard they have been demonstrating at would be impossible to attain without this apprenticeship that is offered. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity to take part and get up to speed. It's wonderful to be a member of this church and to be a part of this mission. Thank you. And now I have a testimony from Jody in Missouri, 14.
Hi, my name is Jody, and I'd like to relate to you something that happened to me recently. I work on my own car, which happens to be a 1990 Chevrolet Corsica. As you might guess, it requires a bit of work to keep running. When I last drove it to take my housemate shopping, I'd stopped the engine to read for a while, but upon starting it up again, it made a most horrible noise that led the both of us to believe that something was going to fly apart. Even so, I drove it home anyway, so I could begin the detective work to find out what the problem was. After an hour, I had ruled out most of the items that could have caused the problem. Then the starter became the focus of my attention, since it wasn't attached to the serpentine belt, which drives the majority of items on the car. As it turned out, the starter bendix yoke was made of plastic with metal on the outside of it, with the metal parts having come apart from the plastic, and was no longer throwing the starter gear into the engine gear wheel reliably. Plus, the metal pieces, which were flying loosely, wouldn't allow the bendix gear to retract and instead made that horrible noise when they would rattle against the bendix gear. The first idea was to find a replacement starter yoke. When this proved difficult, I had to buy a new starter to replace the old one. A friend was assisting me in this project, and once I had this old starter out of the car, he drove me around to the parts stores in town looking at first for a replacement starter yoke. When that proved hopeless, then a newer starter to replace the defective one. Once I had gotten the new starter, my friend helped to install the new starter. Having gotten it securely attached to the car, the next thing necessary for its operation was to correctly attach the electric wires from the car to the 3 different terminals on the starter. which was a problem as I couldn't remember exactly where all the wires were supposed to go. This led to some experimentation on my part. Then my friend had to go home, leaving me frustrated as my car wouldn't start with where I had placed the wires, as I'd guessed where they should go. Realizing my predicament, I then wrote an email to one of the practitioners at the Plainfield Independent Christian Science Church, telling them of my situation. Exhausted, I then went to bed. The following morning, I proceeded to make certain that all the wires were attached correctly, and then examined the area where I put the wires to make sure they were all accounted for, finding one wire in the process that I hadn't attached before, then attaching it to where it was supposed to go, like the other wires were all put into their correct places. With everything then attached to where it was supposed to go, I then reattached the battery cable and started the car, which seems so much a blessing to hear it run. I feel this is a demonstration of Psalms 46:1. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble, as I was at a loss on my own. I am very humbly grateful to that practitioner and her assistants, and to the Plainfield Independent Christian Science Church.
Thank you. Sherdell.
Good evening. My gratitude is dual this evening. I had two in mind, and as I started to write, I realized that they were really going together. I have recently had the great pleasure of seeing a video about Mrs. Eddy and her students, many of whom actually worked in her home, cared for every detail of daily life, as well as holding watches day and night. I have always been impressed by these wonderful people for their dedication and unselfishness. To hear and see the history of this time with Mrs. Eddy reminds me of the workers that I witness who are involved with the Plainfield Christian Science Church Independent. I have never seen this kind of commitment, enthusiasm, and single-mindedness in any other church. There is a reason for all of this, and it is a great love for God, His Christ, and Christian Science, and Mary Baker Eddy. I was first drawn to this church through the website and the watches, and soon came for a visit, and the rest is history. All the names of the people, jobs, states, and countries are too numerous to be listed here. But my heartfelt gratitude for all of you here at Plainfield and out there is huge. I love all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda.
Thank you for the readings tonight. I want to express my gratitude for a healing I had during a Wednesday service. I had stubbed my toe earlier that day and had been rushing about, and it caused me to slow down and take some time to be prayerful, and I realized I was feeling pressured by several things and allowing it to take my peace. When I got to church, I could barely put any weight on my foot. A member reminded me of the quote from Ephesians 6:15. We have feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. Part of the armor Paul tells us to put on. That night I walked out, putting my full weight on my foot without any discomfort. And it also reminded me to quiet my thought and walk with God and not let anything to take my peace. And I also, that night, that service was very instructive, and it brought great peace just to be here. I want to express my gratitude for Christ Jesus, our way shower, Mary Baker Eddy, who gave us this science and showed us how to live it, and this church that teaches us also how to live it practically every day. Thank you.
Thank you. Florence from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sally, for the readings tonight. I'm very grateful for my study and living of Christian Science because it has taught me a lot. One of the most important things is the discipline of holding right thoughts as much as I can. And part of this is not to worry or fret about what other people's opinions are about anything, and that to trust God always, that He alone knows what's true. This has helped me a great deal. It also means that correcting my thought as quickly as I can when I hear or see things that are disturbing. Thank you for that hymn tonight, 383. It reads, "Preserve the tablet of my thoughts from every blemish free." And many verses in the Bible, one of them which is so precious to me, is, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my soul, and see if there's any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting." I realize how important it is to have a pure thought, honest heart, only seeking what God knows is true. And from all this, I feel peaceful. I am grateful that we have the ability, with God's help, to choose to think rightly, and that if we do that, we cannot forfeit claiming our perfection as children of God. Very grateful to be here tonight. Thank you for the readings, and thank you for all the other testimonies.
Thank you. Mary.
Good evening, everyone. I'll begin with an email from Hawaii. I received my letter of acceptance as a member of the Plainfield Christian Science Church after my email to you. I can't describe how grateful and appreciative I am to be part of this church, as I have never joined any organization before. It is my fervent wish to live up to this opportunity and service. Thank you so much. And then California. In the responsive reading in a recent lesson, God the Preserver of Man, appears the verse, "For with thee is the fountain of life. In thy light shall we see light." Psalm 36. Each day when I read this, the images from Mrs. Eddy's Christ and Christmas come to thought. The Plainfield November issue of Love is the Liberator features Mrs. Eddy's book, along with comments she made to Irving C. Tomlinson as to the meaning of the illustrations, and a paper written by Judge Hanna where he recounted times he was with Mrs. Eddy when she was giving instructions to the illustrator. In all but 2 of the drawings, the star is present, with its light, illuminating, protecting, guarding, guiding, healing. Within that light, there is only light. As I work through my day, and with that lesson, I can't help but think about placing myself into that light from the star, God. It is what preserves me. In thy light shall we see light. I am so grateful for all of the work done by the members of this church and donations made so that the Carpenter Library could be purchased. It belongs here. For years I've prayed and listened for inspiration on Christ and Christmas, and was always disappointed that I couldn't find more from Mrs. Eddy on those illustrations. Now my search has finally ended in the sense that I have found what I was looking for, and it is from the Carpenter Library. But this is only the beginning as I ponder the significance of her poem in light of this new material. Thank you, Plainfield, for safeguarding this library for all of us seeking the truth. I am so grateful for this church, the practitioners and members who constantly kindle the light and keep it shining. And then a testimony from California. Dear Plainfield Christian Science Church members, again, I'd like to thank you for all that you do for us around the world. I thank each and every member. I thank all of those who came before us to lay down our foundation and those who kept watch. I joined the church earlier this year and have stayed in touch with a practitioner. My life changed significantly since reading Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures, incorporating the Bible, and by going to the roundtables and services. I have suffered from PTSD, anxiety and panic, for over 14 years now after a head-on car collision. I've been able to manage it somewhat through prayer and meditation on my own. However, it never fully was relieved. It would raise its head often and take my attention away from God at the most inconvenient times. It negatively affected my work, my relationships, meeting with people, and basically just living my life. After meeting with a practitioner on a bout with PTSD and what felt like error all over me, she led me to some Christian Science readings, and I had a better perspective. I was feeling much better, and I had forgotten all about our conversation, but was grateful that she was praying for me. It was on our next call that she said she had prayed for me about my PTSD, anxiety, and panic. It wasn't until she mentioned that I realized that I had finally been completely free of these attacks and the feelings from it. It has been several weeks now, and I react internally completely different to certain situations that would activate it. I am now getting used to living without this constant panic and fear. I write this to tell others that Christian Science works. God works. What a loving God that works through those who have a right relationship with Him. I have gone to doctors, been on medication, therapy, meditation, and none of that completely removed the lie. I am so thankful and so grateful to be free. Christian Science has changed my life in so many more ways to one that works, flows, is bright, and vibrates truth, light, and love. I was unable to accomplish this on my own or in any other way. What I have been looking for all my life was lovingly given to me through this church and through the true teachings of Mary Baker Eddy. I can now see my life from a spiritual perspective rather than mortal mind perspective. I see love now in my life, where error told me there was no love. I am so happy now. I have more energy to pray, watch, destroying the lie, help others, and see correctly for our world. I am no longer bogged down and look forward to continuing to grow in these teachings. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I have other testimonies that came in this week that I'm very grateful for, but as some of you know, we're having a beautiful snowfall in Plainfield, and people need to get home. So I will end with just thanking Fairly so much for those beautiful readings on honesty, such an important quality and one that Mrs. Eddy emphasized in so many ways in her writings. I was reminded in the first edition of Science and Health, she writes, unless a man advances spiritually, he is not scientific. And if he is scientific, he must start honestly and journey some every day. And however long he is in reaching the desired goal, if his honesty is preserved, he will finish his course. I'm so very grateful to be with you all tonight. Have a good evening.
Thank you.